My name is Amanda, I'm 22 years old. And I nearly died on the night my parents chose a party over me. While I lay bleeding in our house, they were clapping for my sister's big moment, pretending everything was perfect. That night changed everything. I'll tell you how it all happened, but first, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more true stories about family drama, betrayal, and courage. It's strange how one night can split your life in two, before and after. For me, that night was my sister's gala, the night everyone remembers as her shining moment. But for me, it was the night I realized just how invisible I truly was. I can still hear the sound of music rattling the windows, every beat of the bass shaking the walls of my room. Our house wasn't a mansion, but it wasn't tiny either. My parents had rented out the old community hall a few blocks away for the celebration, so the gala itself wasn't in our living room. But all the preparation, all the stress, all the focus of that week, it had lived inside our home. My sister, Danielle, was the star. Always had been. And me? I was just Amanda, the spare, the extra, the one you don't notice until she's missing. That night, I was tired of feeling like an afterthought. I'd spent the day helping set up tables, loading decorations into the car, and even ironing Danielle's dress while my mom barked orders like a stage manager. But once everything was ready, once my parents and Danielle rushed out the door in a whirl of hairspray and perfume, I was left behind. No one even asked if I was going. I told myself I didn't care. I tried to settle into bed with a book, pretending it didn't matter. But resentment has a way of filling up your chest, squeezing tighter than you'd like to admit. And when I finally got up to get some water, that's when it happened. The glass slipped. It was stupid, really. My hands were shaking from exhaustion, and the cup shattered on the kitchen floor. I bent down to pick up the pieces, and that's when a shard sliced deep into my side. At first, I thought it was nothing, a scratch. But then the warmth spread fast, soaking through my shirt, a deep red that made my breath hitch. Panic hit me in waves. I grabbed a dish towel and pressed it hard against my skin, but the blood kept seeping. I told myself it would clot, that it wasn't as bad as it looked. Still, when I tried to stand, dizziness crashed over me like a storm. The edges of the kitchen blurred, and I stumbled, catching myself against the counter. That's when it hit me. I was alone. Completely, utterly alone. I tried to laugh it off, whispering to myself, "Of course. Danielle gets a hall full of people clapping for her, and I get this." My voice cracked, trembling between a sob and a joke. But the humor didn't stick. The truth was uglier. My parents wouldn't even notice I was missing until the photos were posted, until the night was over and the applause had faded. I fumbled for my phone, hands slippery, the screen lighting up like salvation. I dialed my mom first. The music on the other end was so loud I could barely hear myself. "Mom," I whispered, clutching the towel tighter. I'm bleeding. I think I need help." Her voice came sharp, distracted, like I was a fly buzzing too close. "Amanda, not now. Danielle's about to give her speech. Don't ruin this. We'll talk when we get home." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my pulse thudding louder than the music I'd overheard. She didn't believe me. Or worse, she didn't care. I tried Dad next. He answered, but only long enough to mutter, "Amanda, we can't deal with your dramatics tonight. Please, for once, don't make this about you." Dramatics. That word sliced deeper than the glass had. I sank to the floor, clutching the phone, the cool towel pressing against my cheek. My breaths came shallow, ragged, each one harder than the last. Somewhere across town, my parents were clapping and laughing. And here I was, holding myself together with nothing but a towel and sheer will. Every second stretched like hours. I thought about calling 911, but the thought of explaining how I'd been left alone, how my parents didn't bother, made my stomach twist. I didn't want strangers to see me as pathetic as my parents already did. I wanted my family to save me, to prove me wrong. But deep down I knew they wouldn't. I thought about Danielle in her glittering dress, standing under bright lights, smiling for cameras. She was everything they wanted. Perfect. Precious. Worth celebrating. And me? I was the shadow in the corner. The quiet one who always cleaned up the mess. The one who could bleed out on the kitchen floor and no one would notice. The dizziness grew worse, and I closed my eyes for what felt like a second too long. Memories flashed. The Christmas where I asked for a guitar and got socks because Danielle wanted singing lessons instead. The birthday they forgot until 2 days later because Danielle had a competition. Every moment was a reminder. I was never first. Not once. My phone buzzed beside me, a message lighting up the screen. It was from my mom. "Smile when we get home, okay? Danielle deserves tonight to be perfect." Perfect. That word haunted me as I pressed the towel harder, praying it would be enough. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall and let the screen shatter like the glass had. But I didn't. I just lay there, listening to the faint hum of music drifting in through the open window, a cruel reminder of what mattered to them. The kitchen smelled faintly of iron and dish soap, a mix that turned my stomach. The clock ticked louder with each second, and I wondered if it was counting me down. Then, in the middle of my fear, something shifted. I stopped waiting. I stopped hoping they'd come through the door and save me. If I was going to survive, it wouldn't be because of them. It would be in spite of them. I pressed harder, grit my teeth, and whispered to myself, "You're not done. Not tonight." And that was the moment, the night, that changed everything. I pressed the phone tighter in my palm, the screen glowing against the dim kitchen light. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the contacts, my vision blurring in and out. Every second a battle between holding on and giving up. I didn't want to call again. After the way Mom dismissed me, and Dad labeled me dramatic, I felt stripped of dignity. But the towel at my side was warm and damp, and the dizziness returned with every shallow breath. Pride couldn't keep me alive. I needed help, even if it came from the same people who treated me like a burden. I tapped Mom's number again. The line rang twice before she answered, her voice muffled by the booming noise in the background. "Mom, please listen," I whispered. My throat was dry, my words thin and shaky. "I'm hurt. I can't stop the bleeding. I really think." Her voice snapped like a whip. "Amanda, not tonight. Danielle's about to go on stage. Can you stop with the interruptions? Do you have any idea how important this is for her future?" My chest tightened. She wasn't hearing me. She wasn't even trying. "Mom, I'm serious. I'm not making this up." I coughed mid-sentence, my stomach twisting as more warmth spread beneath the towel. She sighed so loudly it cut through the music behind her. "You always pick the worst times. We'll talk when we're home. Don't ruin this night for your sister." Click. The line went dead again. I stared at the phone screen, the glow fading as her name disappeared. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the ache of knowing she had chosen a party over me. I wasn't even competing with a real emergency. I was competing with a microphone and a dress. For a moment, I thought about throwing the phone across the room. The anger boiled up so strongly I could taste it, bitter at the back of my throat. But anger didn't stop the bleeding. Anger didn't stop the dizziness creeping in like shadows at the edges of my vision. Dad. Maybe Dad would understand if I tried again. My thumb slid over his name, and the line clicked open. His tone was softer than Mom's, but still distracted. "Amanda? What is it now? Your mom's already upset with you." I gripped the phone harder. "Dad, listen to me. Please. I'm not being dramatic. I cut myself badly. I can't stop it. I need." He interrupted, his voice low, as though he was shielding me from someone nearby. "Amanda, you've got to stop this. Every time we try to celebrate Danielle, you make it about you. You're stronger than you think. You'll be fine until we're back." "Stronger?" My voice broke. "I'm sitting in a puddle of my own blood, and you're telling me I'm stronger?" There was silence on his end, just the muffled cheer of an audience. I thought maybe I'd gotten through, maybe he was finally processing the words. But then he whispered, "Please, don't do this to your sister. Not tonight." I didn't respond. I couldn't. The phone slid from my hand and clattered onto the tile. The sound of the crowd's applause carried faintly through the phone's speaker. They were cheering for Danielle. Meanwhile, I pressed the towel tighter against my skin, fighting not to pass out. A laugh escaped my lips, sharp and bitter. Of course. That's all I am to them, a distraction. Something to be silenced so the spotlight shines brighter on her. I leaned back against the cabinet, the phone still glowing on the floor beside me. My reflection stared up at me from the black screen, pale, sweaty, scared. I barely recognized myself. For the first time that night, the thought crossed my mind. What if I didn't make it? What if I was found hours later, cold and lifeless, while my family danced and toasted Danielle's success? Would they regret it? Would they finally feel the weight of choosing her over me? Or would they tell themselves it was just another example of how dramatic Amanda had always been? Tears stung my eyes, blurring the ceiling lights above me. I didn't want to die. Not like this. Not alone, not forgotten. I grabbed the phone again, desperate for any lifeline. My contacts list glowed, filled with names that suddenly felt foreign. Friends from college I hadn't spoken to in months. Classmates who'd drifted away. Even those names felt like closed doors. Then I saw my grandmother's number. She lived in another state, too far to help physically. But maybe she'd listen. Maybe she'd care enough to hear me out. I dialed, my thumb heavy on the screen. The line rang 3 times before going to voicemail. Her voice played warmly through the speaker. "Hi, this is Grandma. Leave me a message and I'll call you back." The beep cut through me like a blade. "Grandma," I whispered, my voice trembling. I just needed someone to hear me. I'm hurt, and Mom and Dad won't listen. If I don't, my voice cracked. If I don't make it through tonight, I just want you to know I love you. I hung up before the tears could choke me completely. Silence filled the kitchen again. Only the faint thump of music from across town reminded me the world hadn't stopped. For them, it was a night of celebration. For me, it was survival. The room tilted, my body growing heavier. My thoughts drifted in and out, flashes of memories mixing with the pain. Danielle blowing out candles while I clapped from the corner. Mom beaming as she pinned ribbons to Danielle's dresses. Dad bragging to co-workers about his star daughter. And me, always watching, always waiting for a turn that never came. I shook my head weakly, forcing myself to stay conscious. "Not tonight," I whispered again. But this time, the words felt emptier. A sudden vibration startled me. The phone buzzed against the floor. Another message. This one from Danielle herself. "Stop calling Mom. She's busy. Don't ruin this for me. Please, Amanda." The words blurred, my eyes swimming with tears. Even she thought I was doing this for attention. Even she couldn't imagine that I was fighting for my life. A sob broke free, raw and loud. The sound echoed off the walls, bouncing back at me, reminding me how truly alone I was. I curled tighter around the towel, pressing harder. The fabric was soaked, sticky, and heavy now. I needed something else, another layer. With shaking hands, I reached for the dish rag hanging by the stove, tying it clumsily around my waist to keep the towel in place. My fingers fumbled, but I managed a knot, sloppy but tight enough to hold. Every breath was harder now, but I forced myself to stay awake. If no one else was going to save me, then I had to find a way. But even as that thought flickered, another wave of dizziness dragged me down. The phone buzzed again, this time with a group message. My family group chat lit up with photos of Danielle smiling under bright lights, holding a bouquet of flowers. My parents commented with heart emojis, proud words filling the screen. I stared at the photos, my vision tunneling. They were all there, together, celebrating. And I was here, bleeding out, just a ghost in their story. The irony cut deeper than the glass ever had. And in that moment, as I lay on the floor, phone in hand, towel soaked through, I understood something I'd been avoiding my whole life. Their love was conditional. And I had failed the conditions. Still, even as the pain pulled me under, I clung to one last thought, one last fragile thread of defiance. If I lived through this, I would never beg them to see me again. The room grew colder, or maybe it was just my body shutting down from the pain. I couldn't tell anymore. My phone lay useless on the floor, its faint glow dimming before it finally went dark, leaving me in near silence. Only the thumping in my ears, louder than any music that must have been blaring at the gala, kept me tethered to reality. I pressed my trembling hand against the wound, trying to keep pressure on it, but my strength was slipping fast. Every time I moved, I felt like I was floating somewhere between waking and passing out. My breaths came shallow, uneven. Panic clawed at me, but so did an odd determination. I couldn't give up. Not yet. I forced my eyes to scan the room for something, anything, that could help me. My gaze landed on a crumpled towel hanging from my desk chair. Summoning every ounce of energy, I stretched my arm, fingers shaking as I tried to reach it. My nails grazed the fabric once, twice, before I finally managed to grab it. "Come on, Amanda. Don't you dare give up now," I muttered, my voice cracking as if I were scolding myself. Talking kept me awake, kept me from slipping too far into that dark, peaceful void calling my name. I pressed the towel hard against my wound, gritting my teeth until my jaw ached. It wasn't perfect, but it slowed the bleeding a little. For a moment, hope flickered inside me, small and fragile. But then the house betrayed me. A sudden creak from the hallway made my blood run colder than ice. At first, I thought it was my imagination, but then I heard it again, slow, deliberate. Someone was inside. My parents? My sister? A neighbor? No, none of that made sense. My parents were gone, wrapped in their glittering world of champagne and speeches. And no neighbor would just waltz in. Fear knotted my stomach tighter than the pain itself. I reached for the nearest thing that could serve as protection. A half-empty glass lamp on my bedside table. I wrapped my trembling fingers around its base, pulling it close, even though I barely had the strength to lift it. The sound grew louder, closer. A shadow stretched against the sliver of light under my door. Whoever it was, they were just standing there, listening, waiting. "Who's there?" I whispered, though my voice barely carried. No answer. The doorknob turned slowly, and my chest tightened until I could barely breathe. My instinct screamed at me to hide, but there was nowhere to go. I was too weak to move, too broken to run. The door creaked open an inch, then stopped. A pause. Then another slow push. And then nothing. Whoever it was changed their mind. Or maybe they were toying with me. The shadow disappeared, the footsteps retreated, and the silence that followed was somehow even worse. Tears blurred my vision as I tightened my grip on the lamp. I hated feeling so small, so defenseless. The thought of dying here, unnoticed and alone, while my family danced under chandeliers, it made my chest ache more than the wound itself. I thought of my sister, twirling in her gown, smiling for photographs, probably enjoying the night of her life. She wouldn't even realize her little sister was fighting for hers. That thought stung more than anything else. Minutes crawled by like hours. My body begged me to rest, but my mind screamed to stay awake. I tried distracting myself with memories, better ones, safer ones. The time my dad taught me how to ride a bike. The afternoons my mom and I baked cookies together. The way my sister used to braid my hair when I was little, before she decided I wasn't cool enough to be seen with her. But every memory came with a sharp edge. Those moments felt like lies now, painted over by the truth. When I needed them most, they weren't here. The towel grew damp and heavy. I could feel warmth seeping through again, faster this time. My vision doubled, then blurred. No, stay awake," I whispered, my words slurring. I looked toward the window, desperate for light, for a sign that the world outside still existed. Street lamps glowed faintly, their light spilling weakly through the blinds. Somewhere in the distance, I heard laughter. Neighbors probably hosting their own party, unaware that just a few feet away, I was trapped in my own nightmare. Anger bubbled inside me, cutting through the haze. How could life keep moving so normally when mine was falling apart? How could people laugh while I fought to breathe? That anger became fuel. I couldn't depend on anyone else. Not my parents, not my sister, not strangers. If I was going to survive this night, it had to be me. I scanned the room again, my eyes landing on my school backpack tossed near the dresser. Inside, I remembered, was a small first aid kit I'd thrown in for gym class once. If I could get to it, maybe I could do something, bandage myself better, stop the bleeding more effectively. It felt impossible, but I had no choice. Dragging myself inch by inch, I clawed toward the bag. Every movement sent fresh waves of pain tearing through me. Sweat poured down my forehead, stinging my eyes, but I refused to stop. When I finally reached it, I yanked it open with trembling hands, spilling notebooks and pens across the floor. Buried beneath them was the kit. Small, flimsy, but in this moment, it felt like a lifeline. I tore it open with my teeth, fumbling with the gauze and tape. My hands shook violently, but somehow, I managed to press the gauze against my wound and wrap it tight with the tape. It wasn't perfect, but it slowed the bleeding more than the towel had. Relief washed over me, mixed with exhaustion so deep I could barely think. But then I heard it again. The creak. The footsteps. This time closer. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I clutched the lamp tighter, even though I knew I could barely lift it. The door opened wider now, slowly, deliberately. "Who's there?" I croaked again, louder this time, though fear cracked my voice. Still no answer. The door inched open until the darkness of the hallway spilled into my room. For a long, terrible moment, I thought I'd finally see who had been lurking outside. But the space remained empty. My mind spiraled. Was it the house shifting? My imagination? Or was someone deliberately tormenting me? I didn't know. And in some ways, not knowing was worse. I stayed like that for what felt like forever, frozen, lamp in hand, waiting for something, anything to happen. But nothing did. Finally, my body gave in. My arm dropped the lamp to the floor, the crash echoing in the silence. My strength was gone. But as my eyes fluttered closed, I whispered to myself, "Not yet. You can't let it end yet." And with that thought, I slipped deeper into the darkness, still fighting, still hoping, even as everything around me blurred into nothing. Darkness swallowed me, heavy and suffocating, yet not quite enough to take me completely. My body wanted to let go, but some stubborn part of me clung to life like a child clutching a blanket in a storm. The faint scent of iron still lingered in the air, mixed with sweat and the musty odor of the towel I had abandoned on the floor. When my eyes fluttered open, I wasn't sure how much time had passed. Minutes? Hours? The room looked the same, but my breathing was slower, heavier. My body was drenched in cold sweat, and the gauze around my wound had soaked through again. But I was still here. Alive. A strange kind of relief filled me, followed instantly by dread. Because survival, I realized, came with a price. The quiet truth pressing at the edges of my mind. The one I had been avoiding. No one was coming for me. My parents weren't rushing home. My sister wasn't checking her phone. The world outside hadn't stopped turning, even though mine was spinning out of control. I was truly on my own. I shifted slightly, trying to sit up, but the effort made me groan out loud. My voice startled me. It sounded weak, like it belonged to someone else. That was when I noticed something new. The house was too quiet. No footsteps, no shifting floorboards. The earlier intruder, or maybe figment of my imagination, was gone. The silence should have comforted me, but it didn't. It only reminded me of how completely abandoned I was. I dragged my hand across the floor, searching blindly until my fingers brushed against my phone. I pulled it close, but the screen was black, lifeless. Out of battery. My last lifeline gone. Tears filled my eyes, hot and heavy. "Why didn't you answer?" I whispered into the emptiness, my words trembling. At first, I meant my parents. Then, as the tears kept coming, I realized I meant everyone. My sister. My so-called friends. The people who claimed to love me but left me unseen, unheard. The truth cut deeper than the wound ever could. I wasn't a priority. Not to them. Maybe not ever. A sob tore through me, raw and unfiltered. I pressed my face into the damp towel. The sound muffled, but it felt like the only thing left to do. Cry. Rage. Let it all out. But survival demanded more than tears. Somehow, through the blur of grief, another thought rose inside me, sharp, unwelcome, but undeniable. If no one else cared enough to save me, then maybe I had to save myself. Not just tonight, but always. I wasn't ready for that truth. It felt unfair, cruel. Children shouldn't have to save themselves. But reality doesn't wait for fairness. My stomach growled faintly, surprising me. The pain was so overwhelming that I had forgotten hunger existed. I realized then how weak my body was getting. Not just from blood loss, but from sheer exhaustion and neglect. Dragging myself again, I reached for the nightstand drawer, fumbling until I pulled it open. Inside were scattered odds and ends, an old flashlight, some spare batteries, half a granola bar I had shoved there weeks ago. My shaking hands tore at the wrapper, and I forced myself to nibble the stale bar. It tasted like cardboard, but it gave me something. A spark of energy. The flashlight, though, became my true anchor. With trembling fingers, I clicked it on, and the small beam sliced through the darkness. My room looked less like a tomb and more like a battlefield. Messy, chaotic, but alive. I used the light to check my wound. The makeshift bandage was soaked through, but the bleeding had slowed. Not stopped, but slower. It gave me hope, though not much. Still, hope was dangerous. It made me think too much. My mind wandered to the gala again. I pictured my sister twirling under the chandelier, the audience applauding, my parents' proud smiles. All while I was here, choking back sobs and fighting to stay alive. The bitterness tasted worse than blood. Was I ever enough for them? I whispered, the words trembling out of me. The truth hit me like a blow. No. Not enough to be chosen. Not enough to be missed. And yet, despite everything, I wanted them to care. That longing made me feel weak, but it was real. Survival wasn't just about keeping my body alive. It was about facing the ugly truths I had buried. A sudden bang outside snapped me back. My flashlight beam jerked toward the window. For a split second, I swore I saw movement, someone slipping past the bushes. My pulse spiked. The earlier footsteps hadn't been in my head. Someone had been here. Maybe still was. I held the lamp again, my grip steadier this time. My fear transformed into something else. Anger, sharp and hot. Whoever was outside, whoever had dared to creep into my house while I was bleeding out, they weren't going to win. Not tonight. Minutes ticked by with no further noise, but I stayed ready, the flashlight aimed at the door like a weapon. My breath came shallow, but I forced it steady. I wasn't just fighting for survival now. I was fighting for myself. Hours, or what felt like hours, passed. Slowly, exhaustion wore me down again. But I clung to wakefulness. And in that fragile silence, another unwanted truth whispered to me. This wasn't just about tonight. This was my life. Always invisible. Always overlooked. Always fighting battles no one even noticed. That realization cracked something open inside me. I remembered moments I had dismissed before. The times my parents forgot to pick me up from school, leaving me waiting while the parking lot emptied. The nights they argued about my sister's future, while my own dreams went unheard. The way I had learned, little by little, to keep my needs small, my voice quiet, because nobody listened anyway. The truth was this wound wasn't the first cut. It was just the one that showed on the outside. I hated that truth. But maybe facing it was the only way I would survive. I see it now. I whispered to myself, my voice steadier than I expected. I see what I mean to them. The words hung in the air, heavy and freeing all at once. My eyes grew heavier, the flashlight beam wobbling as my grip loosened. I fought sleep, fought the darkness, but even as my body weakened, my mind held on to something new. Not hope, not anger, something in between. A vow. If I made it through this night, I would never let myself be unseen again. And with that thought, I lay back, pressing the lamp to my chest like a shield. The flashlight beam dimming as my eyelids finally gave in. I didn't know if I'd wake again. But I knew for the first time that survival meant more than breathing. It meant facing the truth I had always been too afraid to say out loud. And now there was no going back. When my eyes opened again, the light pouring through the blinds was pale and gray. The kind of early morning that makes everything look washed out and unforgiving. My chest rose slowly, and for a moment, I wasn't sure if I was still alive. The lamp had slipped from my hands sometime during the night, resting beside me, its bulb cold and useless. I shifted, and the sharp pull from my side reminded me I hadn't imagined it. The wound was real. The blood was real. The tears and the silence real. But so was the fact that I had made it through the night. Somehow I was still here. The quiet around me was heavy, almost accusing. My parents hadn't come. My sister hadn't called. No one had stormed through the door in panic or worry. I had fought through the longest night of my life completely alone. And the morning sun only made that truth brighter. I wanted to feel relief, but what I felt was something different. Cold clarity. I lay there, breathing carefully, and thought about what came next. Survival had been about fighting through the darkness. But now survival meant making a choice. A choice about who I wanted to be and who I would no longer allow myself to rely on. My parents had made their choice last night. They chose my sister. They chose the gala. They chose appearances over blood. That realization didn't leave me crying anymore. It left me hollow, but firm. I was done begging to be noticed. With slow, painful movements, I sat up. My body protested, but I gritted my teeth and pushed through. I peeled back the soaked layers of cloth around my wound and replaced them with strips from a clean sheet I tore. It wasn't professional, but it was enough to get me through. I had gotten myself this far. I would carry myself the rest of the way. A knock startled me. Not the sharp rap of police or strangers, but a hesitant, almost guilty sound. My neighbor, Mrs. Carter, stood in the doorway when I cracked it open. Her eyes widened the moment she saw me, pale and trembling, with bloodstains marking my clothes. "Amanda? Honey, what on earth?" Her voice broke off as her gaze dropped to my side. She didn't wait for my explanation. She hurried in, guiding me to the couch like a mother hen. "I'm calling an ambulance," she said firmly, her hands surprisingly strong on my shoulders. I wanted to argue, but the truth was I didn't have the strength. I let her. When the paramedics arrived, I kept my eyes down, answering questions softly, keeping my voice steady even when my inside screamed. At the hospital, the doctors worked quickly, cleaning, stitching, stabilizing. I watched the fluorescent lights pass above me, one by one, as they wheeled me through the hallways. I listened to the buzz of monitors and the low hum of voices. And through it all, I kept waiting. Waiting for my parents. Waiting for my sister. But they didn't come. Not for hours. When they finally walked in, I saw it in their faces immediately. Not guilt. Not fear. Just annoyance. Like this was an inconvenience, an interruption in their perfect storyline. My mother folded her arms. "Do you realize how embarrassing this was for us last night?" Embarrassing. That was her word. My father nodded, his jaw tight. "You scared your sister half to death when you called like that." She had to go back on stage shaking. I stared at them, my lips parted, but no words came. My sister hovered in the background, not meeting my eyes, still dressed in the remnants of her gala gown. That was the moment the last piece of me snapped. I had spent years convincing myself they loved me differently. That maybe I just wasn't as good at shining, so they overlooked me. That deep down I mattered. But standing there, with their disapproval heavy in the room, I realized the truth. I would never matter to them the way I needed to. And it wasn't my job to keep trying. So I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I let their words wash over me. And when they left, I made my decision. I would walk away. It didn't happen overnight. Healing took time, stitches, rest, therapy for both body and mind. Mrs. Carter visited often, bringing soup and soft words. She didn't ask too many questions, just sat with me when the silence got too heavy. Somehow, her presence filled the space my family never had. During those quiet afternoons, I thought about the night over and over. The ignored call. The silence. The truth that survival had forced me to see. And with each passing day, my resolve grew. When my parents called later, checking in only to ask about insurance and bills, I kept my answers short. When my sister texted selfies of her trophies and achievements, I replied politely but distantly. I built walls brick by brick, without announcing them. One evening, weeks later, I stood in front of the mirror, tracing the scar on my side. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't small. But it was mine. Proof of everything I had endured. And everything I had decided. I spoke out loud, my reflection steady. This doesn't define me. But it reminds me. The scar reminded me that I had bled, I had cried, I had begged, and I had survived anyway. It reminded me that my strength didn't come from being chosen by others, but from choosing myself. From then on, I stopped waiting for invitations to be loved. I poured myself into friendships that felt mutual, where I was seen and valued. I opened myself to people like Mrs. Carter, who had shown me more care in a single night than my parents had in years. Walking away wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a slammed door or a screaming match. It was quiet. Peaceful almost. One morning, I boxed up old photos of my family and slid them under my bed. Not because I wanted to forget, but because I was done letting those images define my worth. I started journaling too. Each night, I wrote one thing I had done for myself, Something small, something kind. The first entry read, I stitched my wound. I saved my life. By the 10th entry it read, I laughed with someone who listened. By the 30th, I don't feel invisible anymore. The scar faded, but I never covered it. When someone asked, I didn't shy away. I told them the truth, that it was a reminder, not of pain, but of resilience. And slowly, I learned something powerful. Revenge wasn't always loud. It wasn't about payback or making someone hurt the way you hurt. Sometimes, revenge was as simple as living well in spite of those who failed you. My parents still send messages sometimes, shallow attempts at small talk. My sister still shines, still posts her glittering successes. And I don't compete. I don't chase. I let them live in their world while I build mine. Because walking away isn't weakness. It's strength. It's reclaiming power from those who never knew how to handle it. Now, when I look back at that night, the night I bled out while my parents partied at my sister's gala, I don't just see pain. I see the turning point. The night I stopped waiting to be loved. The night I chose myself. The night I learned that survival isn't just about living through the darkness, but about walking into the light, alone if I must, but never invisible again.